Okay. So let me, start, by talking the current situation. You already know my name is Santhosh Shekar, and I work as knowledge management architect. Uh, Got the auditor, accredited auditor, and also I became author for one of the books called Design Knowledge Management System. So now, the real challenges today, especially when it comes to knowledge management. Before we talk about knowledge management, one of the greatest challenge what we have today is with the pandemic last 1 to 2 years. I think that has completely it's created a completely different scenario for the whole entire workforce, which I think from past 100 years, whatever there was a work culture, I think that has completely gone flipped now, right? So now fundamentally, this has changed. Then, additionally, this has happened. But before that, there was already there are a lot of challenges within organization. When we talk about individual as a knowledge worker, we have a challenge being a knowledge worker. There are multiple aspect of self, right? So in this model, what we have tried to do is, I've tried to create a model where a lot of things kind of becomes clear for us, because one is ourselves, as an individual. When we talk about, we have constraints, whether it is mental constraints, experiential constraints, limitations, psychological constraints, movement, and perceptual auditory constraints. uh, I will not go very deep, because I just, this is something we need to, it's very, very interesting topic, but I'll not go into deep. For example, experiential mental consciousness, I may be very good in mathematics, but I may not be very good in my communication or in my linguistic, the way I express, right? So similarly, each and every individual has certain, strong areas and personalities and certain thing. How is this applicable in organization, right? The one of the challenges is, let's say, assume you as a new being, I join an organization today. There are always so many thoughts happening in our mind, like, okay, where do I find this information? Who has this information? Or what do I, ask that gentleman who could share this information, or that knowledge? So these are the so much thoughts happening in our mind. If we find the knowledge, whatever we are seeking within our, within our domain of, knowledge, then it becomes easier. Otherwise, it becomes such an, very difficult for us to contribute towards the work or get things. It gets delayed, right? So similarly, just assume this is just one domain of challenge what we have within ourselves, right? Now, when we interact with other individual here, when we talk about other individual, so again, he also has such challenges, I mean, so again, there's it now when it comes to second dimension. In the second dimension, whatever I speak, the gentleman understand as it is, and whatever he speaks, I understand easily. There's a complete communion, right? But there are times when we feel I say something, he understands, and he does something, and the other person says something, I don't really want to do it, I say yes, and I don't do it, right? So these are all more related to our emotion and, psychology. This is the second dimension of challenges when it comes to, people. Now, I mean, I'm just trying to build up this thing, right? First is myself as a first, as in first dimension. The second dimension, there's the two people, right? So similarly, when we talk about, multiple, we interact with our digital domain and electronic domain. What happens in this digital domain? I mean, all our digital files, all our, whether it is Word, PPT, everything is there in our hard disk. There are emails, there are mobile, there are multiple applications. There's so much of information we need knowledge. Again, findability is itself is one of the major challenges, right? So similarly, we have this pandemic has shown us natural world, that is, physical spaces are so important. Now with we working in isolation, there's always a challenge in terms of, earlier what we thought to be taken as granted, that you turn around and ask your colleagues saying that how do I do this, how do I do that. It was so easier to get some of the things done, but today even to reach out to your manager or your colleagues is a challenge, because you're working in your own, spaces of your home, or yeah, virtual offices, right? So this has to the other dimension. Digital domain is one thing. Again, your own physical space and proximity adds a different dimension. Now, again, when we talk about as a society or as a group or a team, that itself is in a different dimension. Like how do we interact with our finance team, or how do we interact with the marketing team, or how do we interact with the clients? So again, this is completely different, dimension where challenges are multifold. So the whole idea of this particular model is this was already existing. This world of knowledge conscience model was already existing. I mean, around the world. Along that, we have got this pandemic, and it has created much more challenges within each of every organization. It has challenged every work culture, whatever we have been practicing so far. Now, within this domain of knowledge consciousness, we still need to operate. We still need to be successful. Now, how do we do it? Right? So one of the important principles which could be of great help in creating resilience across the organization is knowledge management, right? So knowledge management becomes critical subject, which is going to help us in dealing and making whatever is unworkable to make it workable, right? So, I mean, I will not go into the challenges. I think Nick has spoken in length, and even Stan has spoken in length. So, but when it comes to, I've worked in various industries and multiple industries. Some of the common areas in every organization is whether it is knowledge management, whether it is knowledge assist management, or whether it's lessons learned management, or community of practices, or knowledge retention programs. These are some of the areas which are common across the companies, whether it is travel industry, whether it is oil and gas industry. It doesn't really matter, right? So now, as I mentioned, now how do we really look at where do we if you are looking at application of knowledge management, this as I mentioned, knowledge management principles are applicable. As I mentioned, this is actually the cover of the book as well. It is not only applicable to agricultural fields, it is also applicable to manufacturing across subsidiaries of manufacturing. Again, it is applicable to manufacturing. Every organization manufacturing can look at knowledge management as one of the principles, apply the principles and practices. Then you have latest telecom, IT, BPO, etc., etc. So this knowledge management in this kind of scenario is a must in terms of every other organization, no matter what, which sector it is or whatever it is. So now again, the challenge is how do we pick what is the scope, or how do we do? So there are a lot of things here. I will not go detailed because again I have very less time, but it is there. So let me actually talk important thing about how well we can really look at knowledge management approaches. There could be multiple approaches when it comes to knowledge management. It could be ad hoc. I mean, whatever we know, a lot of knowledge management could be happening at a team level or project level, right? Then it could be standalone. There could be one project manager or some director level. He could be managing knowledge very well. He may not call it knowledge management, but still he would be really focused on what needs to be done, how it has to be done. So that is one thing, right? Again, initiatives. There are multiple organizations who drive multiple initiative for continuous improvement, whether it is Lean or whether it is Six Sigma. During that time, there may be multiple programs which falls under knowledge management bandwidth, but they will not call it knowledge management, right? Again, that is also part of this approaches. And came function. If you really look at organizations today, does every organization like sales and marketing has knowledge management function? No, they don't have. Does every organization have knowledge management, at least one knowledge management person who works part-time or full-time? May not be. But there are only select few organization, multinational organization, top organization who have this knowledge management function, who are doing various knowledge management activities and initiative project. So that is the common approach what we have been seeing, which is supporting knowledge management as a practice. Then again, there are countries, institutionalization of game. There are countries like UAE, I mean, of course, German and Singapore. Government itself is looking at knowledge management as a policy, and it is driving at the toppest order of the country, right? So that is again a different approach of looking at knowledge management, how it is driven. Now, the important question is, you can always say that, okay, Santosh, we all know this, and we have understood it. So what now? I mean, right? So the important question here is, yes, you might be doing a lot of knowledge management, you might be doing a lot of programs, but one of the significant development what has happened in knowledge management is the standards. Knowledge management standard, which has been released in 2018. uh, I would say this would be a game changer in coming years, because in spite of 20-25 years, knowledge management had, I mean, countries had not come together and agreed on what is knowledge management as such. But at least now, with knowledge management standards, we have one body of knowledge which is agreed across a group of countries, and say, okay, this is what is knowledge management. This is what we think is the management, management of standards for knowledge management is, right. So this becomes very important. Now, I will go much detail today. Maybe in another, I'll take 10 minutes to really understand how do we really understand what is knowledge management. If we have knowledge management programs, how do we map it to this ISO, right? And if you even do not have knowledge management programs, how do we look at knowledge management initiatives? How do we go about doing it? So these are some of the questions which I want to ask and then move forward. So as I mentioned, you saw him here, right? Now, when it comes to knowledge management execution lifestyle, see, today, at any point of time, or you take any programs or any project, whatever you are doing in your offices or organization, generally you need to start initiate the project, then plan exactly what you are going to do, whether it is resources or all things related to that project, right? Then you design the whole overall aspect of that project, right? Then you implement and operate, and there is a continuous improvement, right? So this is the natural way of doing things. They could be, you might be using different names in this. However, but this is pretty much the natural cycle of execution, right? So now, when it comes to game program, or game projects or initiative, game practices, or when it comes to game tool, same approaches can be added here. Let me show you how. See, again, in initiate, as I mentioned, there could be, you might have IT processes, whether it is, develop charter or kick-off project, identify game practices. So these are some of the things how you would go about doing things, right? Now, but when it comes to um, knowledge management standard, see, this is a natural project of the game execution life cycle: initiate, plan, design, implement, operate, and continuous improvement. So the knowledge management standard provides us the requirements which can easily be mapped into our way of doing things, right? So for me, when I look at standard, and when I look at all my 20 years of working in every organization implementing KM or supporting KM programs, for me it was a natural thing of moving to the next level of maturity. That's how I see. Now, if organizations do not have KM, then this standard will become, a guideline where they can follow, and they can have a view of complete life cycle without going through the whole, reinventing the wheel, and they can cut down a lot of learning in between, right? Because see, we have leadership, we have context of organization, planning, support, operation, performance evaluation, improvement. So tell me one thing which you do not do in your organization. I'm sure you would do everything. The one of the important requirements which really would help us in making this knowledge management effective is participation of leadership commitment, right? So that is why when we look at this, right, this is what I say. This is how I envision having adopting KM standard and implement formal KM. There are organizations at the bottom of the pyramid. There's absolutely no formal game. Yeah. So they can start looking at game standard as a first document as a reference and start following step by step and at least have something knowledge management related programs get started. All organizations do not need to go for certification. All organizations do not need to go for audits. Every organization can develop their own solution and declare themselves to be compliant, so they don't need to do audit. So again, we need to really look knowledge management standards driving the adaptation of knowledge management, then this certification or the uh, conformance of the requirements, right? So this is where the power of knowledge management standards come, because this is where now you could go talk to director. You could always ask, okay, now we have financials, can we also add intellectual capital? How do you support that? Yes, we have a standard, knowledge management standard, which can be used in the organization to really look at knowledge assets as we look at our financial assets here, right? Tangible, intangible, right? So in that way, we can get our buy-in from our CEOs or from our directors with our board of directors, right? So there's a huge potential for as a knowledge management professionals or a society or in a country to really drive the knowledge management practices. Now again, the knowledge management standard does not provide you, in terms of what solution. Let me just stop that. So as I mentioned, yeah, right. So we have a huge possibility of various organizations who are already matured in knowledge management. They can start looking at the standard and declaring themselves as ISO certification certified organization. And of course, there are a lot of organizations who have done a lot of work in game, and they can go ahead and do certification as well. So there's a whole lot of how we can make knowledge management formalized. Yeah, so that becomes important. Yeah, I'm just trying to stop this sharing. Right. uh, So with this knowledge management standard, it is going to really help not only getting buy-in across the board, but we also have a lot of startups, a lot of organization and industry can look at developing knowledge management and can create a culture of knowledge management sharing, knowledge sharing, and equal people can really look from the aspect of the 4 or 5 common areas, whether it is knowledge assets management or whether it is onboarding, whether it is on the lessons learned or whether it is a community of practices, right? So these are some of the core requirements or important knowledge areas where every organization can work. So as I mentioned, knowledge management standard again does not tell you what solution you will be implementing. Yeah, in the stand presentation, you already saw there are like 100 plus methods and techniques which are available. You can use any of those things and um, manage each and every aspect of this in the whole life cycle and create results. So we are going to look from the as a as per the standards, we are going to look at how effective is the knowledge management standard. Are you able to evaluate and monitor consistently, right? So these are the requirements we are going to really look, and then we are going to say that yes, based on the standards, the knowledge management systems, they've been able to fulfill the requirements. So this is how there's a whole cohesive system which will form based on the requirements. If each and every organization at least start making knowledge management as a formal way of function, right? Whether it is sales or HR. Once upon a time, finance or HR, may not be a formal discipline, but at least in future, I see came to be formalized. It has not got its due yet, but as I mentioned, with the knowledge management standard, and if knowledge management standards can be pushed at the policy level, at the country level as a policy, I'm sure there's a lot of there's a whole new ecosystem which can start forming around knowledge management, right? So I think I think that's pretty much within this time I've tried to cut on a lot of things, but yeah, this is something which I wanted to share with the team here. And if there's any questions or anything, probably we can discuss. Hello.
Yeah. Are there any questions or comments?
Oh, thanks, but thank you very much for your input or for the overview over the topic.
You're welcome, Elizabeth.
I'm just wondering if you're just about to have some practical use of your knowledge management know-how in specific organizations right now.
Knowledge management standards, or you're looking at, I mean, I didn't get the full question actually.
I'm just wondering if there are some specific organizations that are now using the knowledge management, or the specific organizations which you have in mind when you talk about knowledge management.
Yeah. No, actually, I will share my own experience. I mean, when it comes to, my current organization also, what we have done is we have developed a lessons learned, program. What it does is, see, this is a petroleum organization, oil and gas organization. So there are hundreds of projects which run, and every projects are some billions, dollar worth. So what happens is every project manager or every discipline engineer are busy working and to deliver the project, and they want to make it success, right? Just imagine there are hundreds of such projects and hundreds of such project managers. Do they really have time to come together and sit and discuss, what I know, what you do not know? Definitely not. So what we have done is we have formalized the entire lessons learned, harvesting and capturing reuse systems, where the lessons are captured, across the phases of the projects, and it's uploaded into a database. At the same time, there's a lot of workshops done where the discussion happens. See, again, IT tool stops where the human thinking and sharing starts. So the database is just a way where they get all the things at one place. That's it. But when it comes to exactly understanding what are the real reusable, how they can benefit out of the new project they are undergoing to take, then they're going to discuss. Okay, this is what we did, and we saved 3 months. This is what we did. This design was the challenge, and because of which the schedule got delayed, right? So such sharing in the workshops is what really creates value. And again, believe me, we have project teams, and then there are multiple contract teams. We all bring together this contract and various project teams, and ask them to discuss various challenges they had, and then we capture the lessons from each and every project. This is something very, very highly critical work what we do, and it is really benefited. We have almost saved more than $1 billion of real worth of saving, just because of sharing between multiple projects. This is one example. I can go on giving you real time examples which I myself worked with.
Thank you very much.
Well, I would be interested in if you can talk about use cases where you're implementing your designing principle on KM systems. If you can illustrate that on actual use cases.
Yeah. See, actually, I mean, see, whatever I showcased in the presentation is all has been conceptualized based on practical experience. Whether I worked in, as I mentioned, we have developed various knowledge management portals for hundreds of clients. We have developed various best practices gathering, talking to people, practices, best practices, sharing practices. Then again, there are enterprise search or projects specific to IT projects into knowledge management. Whether it is come to enterprise SharePoint implementation, or whether it comes to talking to clients and building, knowledge assets management, whether it comes to building, designing knowledge management systems for even the pharmaceutical organization. So I worked with multiple life cycles, for 5 years, 7 years. So we have seen exactly what happens throughout this life cycle, working with hundreds of projects. So that has been accumulated, and I've given out this framework, saying that this is a very simple way of looking at this, because same framework is all with the practitioners and consultants. They say that this is in-house, they will not share. But in this book, what I've tried to do is I've tried to put out all this thing material out in the public, so that people can start looking at it, start doing it. So knowledge management can become a major field than just one or few major top few people doing knowledge management. My vision is every worker should be able to understand this philosophy and implement in his work area. Let me give you one example. This is like almost 20 years back. When I was working as a Unix specialist, I had to support thousands of customers with hundreds of servers, right? So we used to sit and provide customer support on email. It was practically impossible. Within 1 month, we had to understand the whole technical things, which was not possible. So what I started building answers repository. If this query comes, this is what is the answer. This is the step 1, 2, 3, like known error database. So that known error database saved us so much of time. It's really created a huge, customer satisfaction increased because of that database. Before that, the challenge was without this, people were same issue. 10 people were working over a period of 2 weeks. We used to waste one day, 2 days. So that cut down to just half an hour. Anybody using it. So that is the kind of process efficiency you bring into when you start applying knowledge management principles. So I was not a knowledge manager at that time, 22 years back. So it was all about, how do we reuse whatever is available, right? The whole evolution of our knowledge has been around reuse. You reuse of whether it is material, whether it is of our, whether it's barter system. It's all about reuse, right? So we have become efficient over doing same thing again and again. We have created, patterns and things, right? So that's how it is. So again, this is from my own experience, and so right. It really makes a lot of difference. I mean, this is where I bring in practical workshop, where I generally train universities and other people, where I go and give specific. I ask them to take one practical area within their organization or there, and then we actually develop a solution, and then they get out of it. So we don't take like forever, like unlike. So that is some of the things which I do apart from propagating ISO 3040.